Good morning, and welcome back to A Novel Lunch. My name is Pamela S. Thibodeau, and I am your writing coach, and I have another guest for you today. Please welcome Mr. Randy Overbeck. Randy, thank you for coming by and visiting with us. Please tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what you write.
Thank you, Pam. I'm delighted to be here and to be able to share a few writing thoughts with your viewers. As you mentioned, my name is Randy Overbeck. I am a doctor of education, and I spent 40 years serving the children of mostly Ohio as a teacher, a college professor, and school leader. In fact, I ran 4 different school districts for 28 years as superintendent and assistant superintendent.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a very interesting, often challenging, but a very intriguing opportunity to be able to serve kids, and which lots of ideas for stories started in the real world. And in fact, that's kind of how I got started. So what I've done is I've kind of mined my experiences with characters and situations, which I elaborate, obviously, and to create my stories. I currently have 6 books published, 5 of them by the same press that you and I share, Wild Rose Press. The sixth one was released just this past year, and it's in the series that I'll talk about today called the Haunted Shore Mysteries. The Haunted Shore Mysteries were this was one of the first reviews given, and I stole it. A reviewer called it a cold case murder mystery wrapped in a ghost story, served with a side of romance, set in a stunning resort location.
Wow, that's a
That's
great review.
that's how it was. I was overwhelmed by the review. I'm going, I'm keeping that. Like
Yeah.
and that's kind of how I'll tell the story about I'll use those as examples of how I tell the stories that I put on paper.
Well, I thank you. And we're so easy for us to thank a service person for their service, when the armed forces or whatever. But I want to take a moment and thank you for your service to education and to children. I think it's amazing. I don't have the patience to be a teacher. I'm sorry. I thought I would at one time, but I'm like, no, give me numbers, give me solitude, but not whole room full of children. And I love children, but nowadays, anyway. But thank you for that. And I really appreciate that wonderful review that you got. And I think it would really benefit my listeners if you would tell us how you go about plotting your books or plotting a series or, do you plot? I'm a pantser. I just start writing. I have a thought or an idea or a scene and I just write. So it fascinates me those that do plot in any way, shape, or form and how it benefits to make a stronger book or a stronger series.
Well, I will borrow a saying that's from a famous thriller writer called Robert Ludlum. And he said he was a pantser caught in a plotter's body. I really like that because it actually describes very much of how I go about to create my story. So to make your readers understand, first of all, I kind of back up just a little bit to say in my educational career, one of my areas of expertise was research. So every place that I worked, I became the research expert. Whatever had to be vetted, whether that was technology, whether that was books, whether that was instructional materials, it was my responsibility to do the research to say, will this really give us the results that we want? As a result of that, I became over the years, became very, research is like second nature to me. And in fact, as I'm writing books, I have almost as much fun doing the research as I do actually doing. So these books involve several layers of research that I need to do, which this is the plotter part, before I ever really start doing the writing. So I'll use my newest book as an example. My newest book is called Red Shadows at Saugatuck. It is the 4th entry in the Haunted Shore Mystery series. And as that review had mentioned, the story is both a cold case murder mystery. There's also a ghost element to it. There always is a small amount of romance, and I've chosen very carefully resort locations. In fact, I deliberately sort out and seek out and find resort locations that people may not know about. For those that don't know, and you can be forgiven if you don't, Saugatuck is located on the western shore of Michigan. So it's on Lake Michigan. It's about the best way to give you it's about an hour and a half around the lake from Chicago. So that kind of tells you where this is. Saugatuck is a very small town. When they don't have visitors in, somewhere around 1,000 people, but it's located in this really beautiful crux of the Kalamazoo River and Lake Michigan, has all these gorgeous houses on all this really interesting thing. I found it a wonderful place. So the first element of my research is I find these places. Each of the four locations are not places I've ever lived in. These are all places that either I stumbled upon in one case or actually sought out and found in the other case. So that's one part of the research. The second part of the research is each of my stories, the cold case murder mystery, is actually tied to some serious issue that the country is dealing with. So my stories are all historical. The first one starts in 98, although this latest one is actually takes place in 2005, 2000. Each of them are dealing with an issue that the country is grappling with. So the very first book, which was Blood on the Chesapeake, was all about racial injustice and discrimination. And the murder, the lynching of a black kid, black teenager. And this book is about MMIW. If those initials don't ring a bell, again, no big
Sweet.
surprise. Missing and murdered indigenous women, Native Americans that have disappeared at an atrocious rate over about, from what we can tell, about 6 decades. And I knew a little bit about that issue, but not a lot. So a lot of the research has to do with that. In fact, one element of my research was that I feature a tribe in this story, the Potawatomi, and I went to the tribe headquarters and met with tribal elders before I began the book to talk about cultural sensitivity, to talk about what things that they want or wouldn't want in a story. And they were really exceedingly helpful and amazed that somebody would come and ask them. So they were very pleased about that. So those elements are all have to be rather intricately researched before I can put the first pen to paper. So from that part, I'm clearly a plotter. So what I do then is I decide, okay, what am I going to, how am I going to set this murder up? But once the story starts evolving, I become full pantser mode. And you get so here's an example. I often struggle, I'm sure you do too, Pam, with trying to figure out what is the right way to start the book. How do you launch it so that readers are immediately drawn into the story? And I actually stumbled upon this idea when I was doing my research. So the story opens with Daryl, his wife Erin, and their new 5-year-old son, which is new for this particular book, stopping at a gas station, convenience store. And while they're there, the son, who's just learning to read, encounters a myth for missing children. And his son insists on having his father read to him what it is. And his father explains that it's a missing teenager. It turns out to be a Native American teenage girl of 17 years old. Anyway, so that actually launches the story. And the naivete of the 5-year-old says, well, let's go find her. Let's figure out where she see his family. So that's how the story evolves. And then from there, I have all these notes that I've made on the town. Okay, what is it to experience this town? And I figure out, well, how do I build these elements of interest in the town in the story in a way that's at least appears organic and it doesn't seem stiff? So now I'm kind of half pantser, half plotter mode. So to give you an example, one of the very interesting, maybe odd, I don't know, characteristics of this particular town, it has a wonderful amusement, I guess is the best way to put it. This family has bought all this land. So all this land around has these huge sand dunes that they're not valuable real estate. You can't build on them. You can't, everything shifts. Well, they had the idea of creating a roller coaster type place in these dunes. And then they then have these trucks with these great big tires that roll through, and you're rolling through these things like 40, 50 miles an hour around these sand dunes. I mean, it's a real hoot. And part of what you stop at one particular point and there's an overview of the town and stuff. And so I built all that into the story. And then in the story, I have my 5-year-old ask the guide, well, where are the Indians? Where do they live? So that just gives you an example of how I use the research in the evidence of both of how I'm doing the story pants style. One more example might be helpful to your readers because this is
Sure.
something very different. Now, if lots of mystery writers have told me that they write their story backwards. In other words, they decide who the guilty person is. then they build the story around so that the clues eventually lead to them. I don't do that. What I do instead is I never know who the guilty party is until about three-fourths of the way through the book. So I have deliberately put out there 3 or 4 or 5 plausible suspects and make sure up to that point in the book, there are elements as well as red herrings that lead to every one of those suspects. And then when I'm at three-fourths of the book, it just kind of comes to me that goes, now, there are a couple of rotten people, but this one is the one who probably.
That's amazing. It reminds me of Nora Roberts' writing because I don't read a lot of mysteries because I usually figure out who done it within the first couple of chapters. Usually I have an instinct about this guy or that girl or whatever the situation is, but with her suspense novels, she always has that twist at the end and I'm like, I never saw that coming. And I like what you say about some mystery writers write it backwards or start with the ending, because when I talked about plotter, pantster, or hybrid writers to find out what kind of writer you are, I mentioned that some people start from the end. They start from the end and then they work their way forward throughout or backwards throughout the book or however they do it. Me, I'm linear. I start with point A. Now, I may get a scene and then it may show up later in the book, but usually I write linear. It's very seldom that I write way off the cuff or way, and I've never really tried a mystery. I have a couple of suspense. I have suspense short stories in my collections, but I'm not really, like I said, I'm not big on mysteries because I usually figure it out. And if I can figure it out that quick, I don't know how I'm going to plan enough red herrings and clues and stuff but that might be a challenge one day to just kind of try my hand at it. So I think it's a wonderful idea. Thank you for sharing all that with us. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us about your plotting or your writing methods?
Well, and I thought the reason I do it that way is because I figure if I don't know who did it, well, then when the reader gets that far, they don't know who did it either.
Exactly.
My reviewers if you check the reviews out, many of them will say, "I thought it was this guy. Nope, I thought it was it. No, Randy Overbeck twisted us around again." Some of that's deliberate. In fact, for some of the books, what I've actually done in order to make all that work. Okay, so here's the plotter part of me coming back out. Here I am 95% of the way through the book. I have created a database that I go back. Okay, here are the 5 suspects. Have I placed a clue for each one of these suspects that they could be the one that's involved in doing this? So that again, that's the research, that part coming out. It is that combination of all this research up front, and I don't want to mislead people. I'm almost always having to stop someplace in the novel and then go either search my own notes or go, I don't have the answer to that. What is that? So I go back and have to look at my files, look at my pictures. I do, of course, use the web and I look up. There was one place in Red Shadows that I actually had my memory of what the location looked like was not accurate. And I ended up going back on the web, looking at Google pictures, not Google Maps, to look at this place again and go, I forgot that was there.
Mhm.
So some of that research has to be ongoing because, and I do work really hard to create a really clear picture of what these places are. I've been very fortunate. Many of the natives have come back to me and said that I've done a great job of capturing that town. It's a
That
little tricky, Pam, because one of the things I don't want to do is disparage these wonderful places. So I
right.
always find a ways to deflect the blame for the murder. It's not
Mhm.
the own's fault. Something happened, or in the case of the first book, I actually invented a town. The area is accurate, but the town was. But in the other 3, in Cape May, in Crystal River, and now in Saugatuck, each of those towns are exactly as I described them, and it is when the story takes place. Cape May is described in 1999. What stores were there in 1999? What restaurants were there in 19? All of those things that's what I build into the story. Again, that's leaning on my plotter side. So I guess
Right.
I must be like 60% plotter and 40%.
Definitely a hybrid, definitely a hybrid. Where do you keep all this information? Do you keep it in folders on your, uh computer? Do you have a notebook with your notes? Do you have like a storyboard or something to kind of keep you going in
I
the
don't
right
have a
direction?
storyboard. I do use the others. I don't keep a notebook, but I do have a folder that has everything from photos, notes that I took when I was there. In one case, you'll love this. I was trying to search for accurate names for the area. So I went to a cemetery and copied down a whole bunch of names in the cemetery of the town that this takes place. And I wanted to make sure that it sounded like they were from there. So one folder has that kind of information on it. Other parts are digital. So when I was telling you about the database that I created, that's digital. I always have some kind of database. This is not before, this is after of the book so that I can go back and look at how did I describe that character? What kind of hair did they have? Those kinds of things as the book is emerging. And I want to make sure that I thought I covered that in chapter 4. Is that right? I want to go back and look at it. So I need that database to go back so I'm not just flipping back through the digital pages of the manuscript going, where was that? So I try that to kind of shorten how much it takes me to go back and forth in there. Beyond that, it's kind of a catch as catch can. Most everything I do on the computer, which is a real triumph because I can't type worth a darn. And it's kind of a hybrid of things. I don't do any AI stuff. There's nothing involved in AI. The only AI I ever use is sometimes when I'm trying to look for something. I did something yesterday in AI. I actually had to do with a historical period, and I asked, what trees, and this is for my new novel, what trees grew in Oyster Bay in 1776? What were native to that land? So
Mhm.
those things I'll use AI for.
Right.
I used to just type on the web. But other than that, there's nothing else that I use.
Well, that's good to know because there's so much controversy with AI, and I use it for research a little bit. I don't do a lot of research because I mostly write contemporary and I write areas that I know. Now, I have gone, like if I visit an area or heard of an area, I'll go back and go to the website of the town or the county or whatever and get information there. And I have like I'm working on a series of women series and I asked it, what kind of trees grow in this area? Describe a college campus in this area, and things like that, a college campus of this type of college. So I get that kind of information, but that's very rare. But I like the fact that you're not using it to write your book itself because that's just I don't know, there's a lot of controversy and I don't think AI will ever take the place of a true writer because it just doesn't have the emotion that
No, it
readers
doesn't.
want and writers are known for.
I thought of something else in terms of research that would probably help, that could be of benefit. So, since each of my stories have taken place in another town, one of the things that I've done is when I go to each of these towns, is I've become good friends with either the president of the Chamber of Commerce, the chairman of the Visitor Center. It's different in different towns. And they have proved to be incredibly helpful. It's just amazing. So helpful, in fact, that they actually end up reading my manuscript and vetting it to make sure that I've gotten the details of the town right.
That's amazing.
Um,
There was a time that I was researching one of my stories. It's set in Recluse, Wyoming. And back then, there was not the internet like there is now when
mhm.
I actually wrote or had the premise for the story. And the post office, you can't hardly reach a local post office anymore, but I was able to reach the post office and I took notes and emailed them and they gave me all kind of and so it was easy to put the characteristics of that area in the story. It turned out to be a short story, not a novel. When I was researching it, I thought it was going to be a novel, but it didn't work out that way. But still, it's amazing how people will help you. Libraries are really good. Post office, like you said, Chamber of Commerce or the
Yeah,
news station. There's a lot of areas that people can go for research. And don't be afraid to ask. All they can do is say no.
yeah, they were.
And then if you really, really remember their kindness, mention it
I,
in the acknowledgments or something.
if you pick up a copy of my book, you'll notice that in the thank yous I've mentioned.
Yeah,
And when I went and actually brought the book to her and showed it to her, she was almost in tears. She said, "You didn't need."
I
I said,
bet.
"I don't think this could have happened if you hadn't been able to help me." And I'll give you one story that your readers will appreciate this. So, in my second book, which is Crimson to Cape May, There are 2 POVs. So my primary protagonist is a teacher, no big surprise there. High school history teacher who happens to like research. He likes local history and researching, and so that's how he kind of stumbles into these problems. But in the second book, I have a second POV. I chose to have a second POV, that of a 16-year-old goth
A
girl,
16-year-old what?
goth girl. Now this is taking
Goth
place in
girl.
1999. I don't know if you remember, but goth was big,
Yes,
1999.
yes.
And now that's tricky. Here's an old white guy writing a 16-year-old goth girl. So I got help from women and girls who read it. But the big help was, turns out, I didn't know this and plan this. The gal who is the Chamber of Commerce chair, still a friend of mine. When I was sharing her that part of the story, she said, "When I was 16, I was a goth girl." So she gave me some insight into, like, where do they hang out in the town.
Right.
So it was very that's just kind of the things I've been lucky enough to stumble onto. It's worked out really very well.
Yeah, I call that just a little bit of divine intervention there.
You got that right. Yep, yep.
Well, Randy, I thank you very much for joining us today and sharing all your tips and ideas on how to plot out your series or your individual books. And we wish you the best of luck and God's blessings on all of your work.
Pam, thanks so much for having me on. I do want to say that I'm always happy to help emerging writers. I'm part of a writers group, and there we have everything from published writers to people who are just trying to get their first thing out there written. And I'm always happy to provide the help that other people gave me when I got started.
Well, that's wonderful. And so you gave us some links and stuff for you, your bio, your how to reach you, email and stuff, correct?
I did, yes.
Okay. That will be in the document that you offered for our listeners to download so that they can follow it to help plot their own novels. So we once again we
If I can help at all my information, including my email, is in that. Feel free to reach out. I will be happy to provide whatever help I can or point in whatever direction works.
wonderful. Thank you again. Well, we hope you enjoyed today's visit, friends, and we hope that you got some valuable information here from Randy. If you enjoy the content on A Novel Lunch, please like, subscribe, and share the channel. If you'd like to support us, there's links for that in the show notes. If you'd like to work with me as a coach or an editor for your writing project, my email is in the show notes. Again, Randy has given us a document. All of this stuff is copyright protected, but it will be available for your download, and his links will be in that as well. Until next time, write happy.